announcements, and everybody who's here. Thank you. Everybody who's here gets to make a quick elevator speech about what they're doing, but that's been postponed, so stay at 1 o'clock, folks, stay, and we will introduce you and your programs. I mean, we have some really neat things to introduce you to, like the National Move to Amend person is here today, and I want to make sure we get a chance to find out about that program and the program that's happening tonight. So with that, excuse me?
We cannot hear you.
Okay, now this is a warning, Betty. This is it's a microphone, and the microphone works when most of the people are quiet. Hint, hint. And you almost have to hold it, you almost have to kiss it. It's a really loving microphone. Okay. Pretend you're a rock star. So without further ado, our program has changed for today. All announcements and stuff is out at the end. Please don't leave without staying for at least 5 or 10 minutes at 1 o'clock. Because at 1 o'clock, we're going to cut our other person off because we're giving equal time. So without further ado, for the portrait campaign, we have the candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Betty Sutton. There you go.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Okay, just let me know if I fade away here. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, so I doubt it. I'm used to talking up, to being heard. Thank you so much. I am Betty Sutton, and I am delighted to be here with you. Some of you have been so kind as I come in to say, we're so glad to see you, and I want to say that right back to you, because I can see in this room a group of activists, those who are going to energize and help us deliver victory to Democrats in 2018. Now, I've had the chance to meet some of you, but for those of you who I don't know, I'm first of all grateful to see my friend Connie Pillage, who is here with us today. But for those of you who I haven't had the privilege yet to get to know, I want to share a little bit about who I am and where I come from and why I am doing what I am doing. I told you I grew up the youngest of 6 kids. I grew up in Barberton, Ohio, in Summit County outside of Akron. My dad was a Boilermaker, and my mom worked at the local library. And, you know, they worked really hard to put food on the table and to take care of us, and we had good public schools that we went to, and we were able to get to the doctor when we needed to go. And they tried to save up to retire with dignity and respect, and frankly, because of them, somewhere along the way, I made the decision to dedicate my life to standing up for families just like the one that I grew up in. And so at a pretty early age, I ran for city council in the city of Barberton, and I've had the honor and the privilege to serve people, and you might imagine I was actually still in law school when I ran for city council, and they looked at me and they said, there's never been a woman, no candidates don't look like her, they don't sound like her, they probably won't act like her. But I went door to door, and it made me know the power of the people behind the doors. Because when the election results came in, even though those naysayers said she's too young, she's too female, she's too this, she's too that, the people behind the doors, they made me the top vote getter in every precinct in our community. And the lesson there that was never lost on me and that I've always held dear is that it's about connecting and fighting for the folks behind the doors in our communities to make things work for them and for their families. So I went from there to the county council. I served also as a state legislator, and in that capacity I fought for health care even back then in the 1990s, and today, by the way, is Equal Pay Day. We all know about equal pay and the need for equal pay. We are still far, far behind. We are still far behind, and even back in the 1990s, I introduced legislation to equalize pay for comparable work for women. And yet, here we are, all these years later, still fighting for equal pay. these things have to change, and one of the things that the Cordray Sutton administration will do is we're going to establish a commission on women and girls. And we're going to make sure that, you hear that phrase, sometimes women need a seat at the table? I think women need many seats at every table in numbers equal to the representation of the population. What do you all think about that? So some of the fights that we had in the legislature when I was there then, we're still having now. I was term limited out of the State House. I went back to Northeast Ohio, and continuing with that advocacy that has driven me, I stood up for working families as an attorney, a union side labor lawyer, who fought for fair wages and fair pensions and secure pensions and benefits for workers, a lot of public workers. Do we have any folks who have worked in public service? Not just elective office. Well, thank you all, thank you all, thank you all. Because, any teachers here? All right, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Because I am a person who believes in public service. And I believe that government can be a force for good and that those public servants do the good work of government. So I want to thank you for all of your contributions. When Sherrod Brown decided to run for the United States Senate, he encouraged me to run for his seat. And I didn't think, well, really? Could I run for Congress? This kid from Barberton, Ohio, a daughter of a Boilermaker and a woman who works at the library. But, I remembered those people behind the doors, and I went out and got elected to the United States Congress. And unlikely story as I went there in 2007. And I did it for all it was worth. I fought for our troops who were being sent on extended tours of duty beyond their contract terms under, you remember that policy called the stop-loss policy? It's called the backdoor draft. Well, I fought the Pentagon on that issue and made sure that our troops were given additional compensation, and when they were given additional compensation by the Pentagon, guess what the Pentagon stopped doing? They stopped sending them on those tours of duty. Nice job. So I'm very proud of that work. I also then was a part of passing the Affordable Care Act. And in fact, that amendment to stop discrimination based on pre-existing conditions immediately, that was my amendment, so I am proud of that. Wow. And you may recall, during the height of the recession, our auto industry was in dire straits, and where I come from in Northeast Ohio and frankly all across this state, people were suffering, families were going under. And so I came up with a program called the CARS Act. You may remember it as Cash for Clunkers, that put 60,000 people back to work in the auto industry and helped our communities weather that storm and keep our companies running. And people were working. And the same reason I did that legislation and that amendment to the Affordable Care Act is the same reason I am here today as the running mate of Rich Cordray. Because I am committed, as is Rich Cordray, he is public servant through and through, to making things work for everyday Ohioans. It's about where you aim policies. If you aim only to help those up here and we wait for that trickle down, then I just swear I keep looking up and it's not coming. If we aim policies here, if we aim them at people and making a difference in people's lives, which state government, frankly, hasn't been doing for a very, very long time in this state, people certainly seem to be an afterthought, as opposed to the primary purpose of state government. So I come to you today as the Lieutenant Governor candidate with Rich Cordray, who, as I mentioned, you all know Rich. I told you a little bit about my background, but let me tell you some things about him that you may not know yet. Rich, like me, learned about public service early on. His parents both worked with the developmentally disabled. His father was blind from birth. And they instilled in him this desire to do good in this world. And do good is what he did. So you all know he was the treasurer of the state of Ohio. He stood up to protect pensions for seniors. He then went on and he became the attorney general in this state, where he stood up to those who were engaged in predatory lending and taking advantage of others, and he fought back and he won on their behalf. And because he did a good job there, you know, one of the things that I was also in Congress and we enacted the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau legislation, that Dodd-Frank legislation. Well, Rich Cordray was chosen by Elizabeth Warren and President Barack Obama to lead that agency. And if ever there was an agency that really was about standing up for fairness, standing up and fighting for the little guy, for the ordinary, everyday person who just needs a fair shot, that is the agency that does it. And Rich Cordray helped build that agency. And he took on the greediest institutions in our country on behalf of consumers, on behalf of Ohioans, on behalf of Americans, and once again, he won. He recovered $12 billion for people who were being ripped off by these banks. And one of the things that really will tell you a lot is that, and Connie and I were talking about this not too long ago, you know, when people we were, as you know, fighting, we've been fighting a lot of wars in this country, right? Well, not here, but, right? We worry about what's coming, we worry. But we had a lot of folks who were joining the military, they're signing up to serve our country, and what would happen is there were these predatory lenders out there who would actually target those folks who, you know, just out of school, sign up to serve their country, and in comes these lenders who take advantage of people who never even had a paycheck before. Maybe this is their very first job. And they turned and they looked for help. And they found it at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau with Rich Cordray. And Rich went after these people, and he recovered millions of dollars for 1,600 of our servicemen and women, and he told them that they had to stop. And so Rich Cordray is all about public service, and I feel very, very good about being here as his lieutenant governor running mate, because I know Rich is the kind of leader that we need. And I want you all to know that this is the moment, this is the year that we finally, in Ohio, can unite and win and start making things work for everyday Ohioans, for all Ohioans, not just those at the very top. Now, Rich and I are focused on those kitchen table issues, those issues that people talk about at home, the ones that keep them up at night. We're taking this campaign to the folks in this state, and we want to hear from them, and we've been hearing from them, and I know that you guys are activists, and I appreciate that, and I see the activism out there. You know, I told you a little bit about my dad. My mom, she turned 90 not too long ago, and she and my sister gave me a shirt because she couldn't go to some of the marches that I've been engaged in, and she wanted me to be able to wear this shirt, and this shirt said, they whispered to her, "Are you ready for the storm? Can you withstand the storm?" And she whispered back, "I am the storm." So we are the storm. And we are going to change things this fall, because you know what? Sometimes I feel like we have Stockholm Syndrome in this state. For 24 out of 28 years, the Republicans have been controlling state government. And they've built an economy that doesn't work for everyone. They have, you know, they're all, you know, we're leading in the wrong things and we're lagging in the wrong things too. We're leading in opioid overdose deaths and, you know, infant mortality, and we're lagging in job creation. You know, they talk about jobs a lot, and I guess, you know, they're okay with you having 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. But that's not what we should be fighting for. We should be fighting so that people have opportunities and pathways to good jobs that pay good wages, so that when they go to sleep at night and they put their head on the pillow, they will know it will be okay. Just like my parents were able to do. So the Republicans have not been focused on making things work for everyday Ohioans, but Rich and I are going to be. Whether it's education, you know, it's not just about the jobs, it's also about the pathways to those jobs. And one of the things that I have talked a lot about and we're going to do is we're going to establish a Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity in this state. Can you believe that there's no Department of Labor in Ohio? It's kind of shocking when you think about it. But there should be, because we should be focused on empowering our people, investing in our folks. I'm running out of time. Okay, well, we've got a lot to talk about. And I want to get your questions. So we're going to do that. We're going to put people at the center of our policies and making our economic policies work for them. Healthcare. We need, no matter what happens in Washington, we got to make it work in Ohio. Healthcare is a right. It is a fight of my life. And we will not yield. We will stand up to Donald Trump. By the way, I looked up the term trumped up in the dictionary. And you know, the funny thing is, it literally means, and we kind of know this, but it literally means falsely concocted. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, evidently, that Donald Trump is. So, but no matter what madness comes out of the administration in Washington, we have to make things work here in Ohio. Education, I'm gonna talk just briefly about education. So when I talk about those pathways to those good jobs and opportunities, that begins with pre-K. Right? That begins with strong public schools that are fully funded. Education is the cornerstone of democracy. It's the cornerstone of a good and constructive and productive and well-lived life. It's the great equalizer. That and the vote is the great equalizer. And we need to support our educators. We need to support those who use their lives to teach and lift people up so that they can have a good life. And our economy will be stronger for it, and so will our state. So those issues, those core economic issues, are ones that we are focused on as a campaign, but these other issues, there's so much work, so much repair to do. You know, and I know that, were any of you at the marches for the Women's March? Yes. Yes. And how about standing with the Parkland kids? Yes. Right. Very good. Very good. Very good. Very, very wonderful to have you here. And we will take some questions. We will take some questions. And I do want you all to know that your voices are heard. And we have on the gun violence prevention side of things, and I imagine we might have some questions, and I would love to hear them as well. Your voices continue to be heard. I know that some of you right here in this room have been talking to our campaign and talking to Rich himself about this issue. We have, I want you all to know, a gun violence prevention plan that is on our website that is, it has a number of things that the Parkland kids have marched for, and which I, of course, stand with Rich, and on the universal background checks, stopping the magazines, the high-capacity magazines and bump stocks. There is a provision in there for red flag removal of guns. Certainly wraparound services for our schools. We need to empower those within our schools. And we don't need to arm teachers. We don't need to arm teachers. We need to empower them with nurses and counselors and some resources. There's also a task force called local task force to work together with community leaders, with folks like you, with educators, with social service folks, to continue to fight the scourge and the violence that we see in our state and in our nation. There's a gun violence prevention czar that is also called for, that is forward thinking. That means that no matter what we do right now, we will have to continue to perfect, to make sure that there are common sense things that we must do. Our children are literally marching in the streets. and we have lost far too many. We've also lost far too many to suicide and gun violence in our communities. Oh, okay, sorry. We have lost too many, is what I said. We have lost too many. With that, I am going to take your questions, but I want to thank you again. And I want you to know 24 out of 28 years is too long. Too long. Please join us as we move forward and we change Ohio into a state that works for everyone.
All right. So we have only 10 minutes left for questions, I'm afraid. So by the way, there are 80 of us here today.
I appreciate what you said about gun violence and the impact on our children. I appreciate what you said about gun violence and the impact on our children and the commitment of the campaign to deal with that. My concern, another major concern for me, is public schools, and especially the system that has been established that continues to continually and increasingly drain more money from public school budgets to place them into charter schools, which are often run by people that we would not allow to babysit our children, let alone attempt to teach them. And I'm wondering what you can say about a plan to stop that, because I believe it is a deliberate attempt to destroy the public school system in the United States. I am offended.
I am offended too, and I am so grateful for the question. I mentioned that I was a union side labor lawyer. I represented teachers, okay? And I have stood up way back in the 1990s, and I warned when I was in the state legislature against what these charter schools were going to do to hollow out our public schools. But I not only stood against them there because we could see around the bend what the efforts were about, I also stood against them in the courtroom. I sued White Hat Management on behalf of parents who were being ripped off by them. And so today it's not just White Hat, right? It's not just them, it's also ECOT, which is outrageous. And then those folks turn around and they give campaign contributions to Mike DeWine and those folks over on the other side, who then continue to give them more and more opportunities to take more and more away from our public schools. Rich Cordray and I are committed. We know their tricks, and I am prepared, and so is he, to take them on. But it's more than that. I mean, this day and age where we have been demonizing our teachers and our educators, that has to stop.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
have to finally fix that school funding formula problem that we have had since I was in the legislature. I was on the amicus brief on DeRoff, and yet here we are, all these years later. Well, we don't really need the Supreme Court to tell us to fix it if we have the right governor who is willing to fix it.
Yes.
Just a very brief question. I understand that there's a movement to try to do away with our Board of Education, and I'd like for you to address that issue.
We have to, this is all so connected, the undermining of public education in this state. Look, we need, and we're seeing schools being taken over, right, by the state, and there are, it starts with Youngstown, and it moves to Lorraine, and there are a whole bunch of schools in the on the chopping block. So we need folks to continue to. We should not be eliminating the school board. We cannot consolidate that power and that authority to continue to undermine our public schools in any way, shape, or fashion. There can be nothing. We will be moving in, again, the opposite direction. We've been watching our back so long. We're talking about stopping the siphoning off, but we should be talking about putting the support in. If public education is truly the priority, then we need to put our efforts there first, not after everything else is done. So thank you all, and are you both educators? Were you? Well, that's wonderful. Thank you, that's wonderful. Yes.
I'm Ethel Guttenberg. It was my granddaughter Jamie who was murdered on February 14th. at her school in Parkland. I just want to say, and you partially answered the question, and I've spoken to Rich Cordray myself, as far as gun safety is concerned. And to me, and to my family, and to the families in Parkland, and I think all over the country, our safety from guns is really the primary issue, because without that, we really have nothing. I just thought it was interesting with Rich Cordray's work with developmentally disabled. My granddaughter did that. Yeah, she started as a young kid, she was a dancer. And so, you know, that connection to me just means so much, because she did, through her dance, she worked with developmentally disabled people. And I just want to say, whatever we do, it's so important that this issue not go away again. You know, I have to say, in the last 7 weeks, more has happened in terms of positive things for safety than has happened in 30, 40 years. And so we need people who are really committed to the issue. And I know I'm making a speech, but this is very personal to me, and thank you.
Thank you, Ethel. And what you have to say is oh so important for all of us to hear. So I appreciate you sharing, and I am so sorry for your loss.
My services just be anywhere.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Personal thing that people need to hear that.
She's got a mom's demand action.
Yeah, yes. And I appreciate you reaching out and talking with Rich. And the plan that we put forward, I think it's the place to start. I know that one of the things that prompted me, to come back, after I left the Congress, I went on and I ran the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation in the Obama administration. But one of the things that I was struck by was when I was going back to Washington to do that work, I stopped. And I read an article in a Youngstown Vindicator, and it was in the lame duck session from the last General Assembly here in Ohio, and it was talking about the things that they had done in the past week. And the last week they had passed things that, you know, made it impossible for local governments to regulate puppy mills. And I'm like, really? And puppy mills, sorry. And then, puppy mills, that's a whole nother story, but puppy mills, but the other things that they've done, they had tried to restrict reproductive choice for women, okay? They, another problem, right? Another problem, they also, though, made it easier to carry guns in daycares. And I'm like, this is what they're working on. They try to find ways. That's what we're dealing with now. So we have got to turn that around. And Rich and I can win this race, and we can help make these things happen. And so, thank you. We've got to stop the madness.
We've only got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to just take one from. I'll take 3 more. I'm told I'm allowed to take only 1 more. I know.
Okay, I'll try and make this quick. So, Betty Sutton. You, Betty Sutton, check a lot of my boxes as a voter. However, the Cordray Sutton campaign does not. And we're going to go back to gun control, because you, Betty Sutton, who I wish was running for governor, because let's face it, it's better when women are on top. You have an F rating from Buckeye Firearms and 7% from the NRA.
7%? I don't know where that came from.
That's a failing grade, so
I know.
we'll just keep that there. However, Cordray in the past, in prior races, has been endorsed by Buckeye Firearms. And you have a 100% rating from the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, and it's a lifetime score. So that's kudos to you. But I guess the question I really want to ask, because this really is pressing to me as a mother of a high schooler and someone who just gives a crap, can you please talk to him about the gun control? Because he was an A, he's now a C. That's not good enough.
Okay.
I appreciate your questions, although I wanted to say, where were you? I was running for governor at one point. I didn't. I am, as you say, aligned with much of what you say on gun control, right? I have a record of my own that I bring to this race, and I have a voice that I bring to this race. I am still going to be the person that I have always been, and I am always going to continue to try to move us in the direction that I believe in, right? So you can bet that I will continue to advocate, but I will tell you one thing, that the plan that we have put forward is a good plan. It may be an incomplete plan, because I always think legislation needs to be perfected and things are an ongoing, this is the mission that we're on. But I also know this, that our ticket is the one that can win this race, and we can start to get these things done. And I am still going to believe the things that I do, and I am still going to be for the things that I am for, and you should be too. You should be too. And we should continue to push forward to try and make the change that we believe will make a positive difference in our state for our people on this issue and all issues, but on this issue in particular. But I have no hesitation to stand up and fight for the plan that is in front of us, and to use this moment to win this race and start to change the tide, because I never want to read again in the paper for the next decade when we lose these races that they are just finding more ways to make more nonsense happen.
Right.
Guns in daycares. Guns in daycares, in schools, what do they want? They want churches, they want, I mean, who knows? They think of things that people aren't even asking for. We have got to stop that trend. We have got to stop that trend. And I assure you that the NRA isn't going to be happy with the plan that we put out there. And that is just fine with me. So thank you all so much.
I was told she was a wonderful poet. Thank you so much, Betty Sutton.
Can I just say, for all of you who may not have gotten the chance to answer or ask the question that you may have, I welcome this as just the beginning. Rich and I want to hear from you. We appreciate your advocacy. And all right, she's going to take away the mic. Thank you.
That's Irene.
And by the way, this is Samantha Hurd.
Samantha, hi Samantha.
You can email us at betty@cordrayforohio.com.
Okay. And I promise Mr. Joe, may I call you Joe? And Mr. Schivoni, that we will give you your full half hour. And then guys, you have to stand. Then we have our beginning announcements. So we haven't been able to introduce anybody here, so please stay at the end. But I promise Joe that you will get your full half hour. It is now
Say it again, but we've moved on.
12:33. Now, here's the warning. You have to kiss it really close, or else, especially now, you can't hear you in the back of the room.
You don't actually have to kiss it, but point it at your mouth. You gotta be really, because if you do it this way, yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Joe Schivoni. I'm a state senator from Youngstown, and I've been running for governor for 1.5 years. And I want to tell everybody a little bit about myself. I'm not going to speak a lot on the front end because I can tell this is a group that really likes to ask questions, and so I want to allow for that time. You know, I grew up in the Mahoning Valley. I grew up in Youngstown. I worked a lot of different labor jobs. I worked in a steel fabrication shop. I worked on landscaping crews, construction crews, at a local butcher shop. I fought in the Golden Gloves during high school. I went away to college and law school. I came back to Youngstown to represent injured workers as a workers' comp lawyer, just like my father and my grandfather. I started in the state senate when I was 29, 9 years ago. I got appointed. I didn't have a day of political experience, but I knew that my area needed something different. They needed somebody that was gonna go down there and get to work and kind of put politics aside and try to do what's right for people. And so I've done that, and I've stood by labor with Senate Bill 5. I fought for women's rights by voting no over 20 choice bills. I fought very, very hard for reinvestment in our communities, making sure that we invest in our kids starting in preschool to give them a fighting chance, making sure that we're cleaning up our state, investing in infrastructure, not only clean water, but broadband, roads and bridges, all the basic nuts and bolts stuff. And so last year I said, look, we're going to run for governor because Democrats need to do something different. We cannot continue to roll out the same people running for different positions and expect a different outcome. And so I've done this for a year and a half, from community to community to community, talking to people about what's important to them. And I'm going to tell you that I'm the only one that can paint the contrast with DeWine that is necessary to win. You know, I'm 38 years old. I don't have a huge book that they can go through and find all this negative stuff. I am who I am. I speak very clearly. I answer questions in a way that is truthful and concise. And so the book is out. And that's what I wanted to do here today. I brought my wife. We spent the night in Columbus last night, Margaret, and we're heading down here and then down to the debate. So let's do some questions and we can get down to it. Yes, sir.
The funding for the school system has been ruled unconstitutional. Are you going to fix that?
Yes, about the unconstitutional school funding formula. So when I first started in the Senate, I started working with superintendents across the state and said, how do we fix this, right? And I remember I was speaking at an event because I was a member of Big Brothers and Big Sisters, but I didn't have any educational background. I didn't have any background in school funding. And I was talking about giving every kid an opportunity and giving each individual school district the means in order to accomplish the task for their particular district. And he told me, you know, Joe, I can tell your heart's in the right place, but you got to learn this school funding stuff. And he gave me this little 55-page paperback book that was almost like School Funding for Dummies. And I read it, and I was kind of off base. And I said, look, we need to start investing more into our public schools so that we're less reliant on local property tax. That's what the Duralf case says. And so as we were trying to push, I was pushing legislation to do that, the opposite was happening. The Republicans were opening up the floodgates for for-profit charter schools to come into communities like Cincinnati, pull kids out of the public schools and pull the dollar signs that fly out of the door with that kid. And so not just the for-profit brick and mortar model, but also the electronic model. I remember down here there was a school called, I think it was VLT Academy, that closed the door in the middle of the school year. Kids went to school and there were chains on the door and they couldn't go to school. That kind of stuff is happening across the state. So in 2011, I started putting out legislation to clamp down on for-profit charter schools. And if we do that, we can regain $1 billion a year that we can reinvest into our public schools so we can make the Duralf right. And so in 11, I proposed the bill. 12, 13, 14, 15. Finally in 2015, the Republicans decided to pass House Bill 2. It was just a bunch of stuff that I'd been pushing out for 4 years. And then they all, shook each other's hand and patted themselves in the back like they did something good for somebody. And they just came up with this idea yesterday. But in the meantime, we allowed this to occur because those contributions were so powerful to those Republican legislators. So once we got House Bill 2 passed, it didn't go all the way, but it was a huge step in the right direction with closure law. Then I started going after electronic schools, and I said, okay, here's a bill, guys. Let's require the electronic schools to actually tell us what they're doing with our kids every day. Because they get the same amount of money as the brick and mortar public school down the street, but they don't have to pay for buses, they don't have to pay for heat, they don't have to pay for food, they don't have to pay for behavioral specialists. It is a taxpayer ripoff. So I pushed that bill out, didn't pass, but all of a sudden, the Department of Education and Governor Kasich said, whoa, 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 we have to do something about this. So then they went after ECOT. ECOT closed the doors in the middle of, or shut off the computers in the middle of the school year, displaced 12,000 kids. That's a major problem, and a lot of parents are very, very angry with me as if I was a one-man operation that did that. I took my kids to McDonald's. Margaret wasn't with me. She wouldn't have liked this at all, but I did tell her about this. You know, I walked to McDonald's on Saturday morning. This whole side was filled with a bunch of older guys that were all saying, "Oh, Joe, go get him, man. Fight hard. You're doing a great job." But there was one guy over here that was sitting by himself. He didn't look too happy to see me. And when I walked by to get the drinks for the kids, he said, "You think everybody in here likes you, don't you?" I said, "No, sir, obviously I don't." And he said to me, "You screwed my daughter over." I said, I'm not really sure what you mean." He said, "She worked at ECOT and you took her job away." And I said, "You know, I don't want to get into this, but all I did was try to push a bill that asked for accountability and transparency for electronic learning." And they decided to close the door. He said, "Well, it's all over Facebook." And then he left his breakfast and walked out the front door. He was upset. So this has gotten very hairy because it's been pushed on me and others that are solely responsible for taking away this kid's ability to do this electronic learning. And I'm not saying that it's a all-around horrible idea. For a certain number of kids that have a bad injury or have been bullied or are traveling the world because they're a musician or an athlete, I get the electronic learning model, but not for thousands and thousands of kids to be sitting in the living room because they're losing those soft skills that are so necessary to be successful in life. And so I'll keep pushing that. I don't care if I got to get in a few fights with guys at McDonald's.
Hi, Joe. What are your feelings on single-payer healthcare, and if you like it, what would it look like?
So I think that single-payer healthcare is the place that we need to land. But I think Medicaid expansion is the place that we have to go today. And I'm going to be honest with you, and you know, some of my campaign crew tells me that I have to be more aspirational rather than realistic sometimes. But I've been in the legislature as the minority leader for the past 3 years, and I've worked on there for 10 years. Single payer is not going to pass today with the legislators that we have. So what I try to talk about is continuing to move down the road with Medicaid expansion to give the working poor the ability to get affordable quality health care. We've done a good job with this. You got to say Governor Kasich did a good job with this. The problem is that we have a lot more people that have a card that says that they have Medicaid, but we're starting to struggle finding them service providers that will take Medicaid because the state has not set the reimbursement rates in a place that are workable for home health care, for dentists, for primary care doctors, for physical therapists after surgery. So just because you have this card doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot if you don't have service providers that are willing to take this. So it's about investing in the system. It's about moving towards single payer to eventually eliminate the profit from healthcare and make sure that it is a service rather than just a game with a bunch of steps for people to make money. And so I talk about that in a realistic way with an eventual goal to get there. Yes, sir.
Wait. I'll bring it to you.
All right. I go too fast. I drank too much coffee today.
It's clear that the mood of America is for, there's a need for deep change, and tinkering isn't going to fix it. And 80% of the American public across the board say, get big money out. Do you think that that should be at the top of the Democratic platform in Ohio? Because that's where the voters are. Speak to them and you'll get their vote.
I mean, get big money out can mean anything. I mean, what I've seen is the privatization of a lot of stuff, a lot of service in state government in the state of Ohio since I started in 2009. You know, they privatized the food service in prisons, right? That's so somebody could make money, but we lost a lot of good state jobs. They privatized our developmental center in Youngstown, and in Dayton, we lost tons of good workers, and we also threw a lot of people in these group homes that can't survive there. They needed to be institutionalized because their disability was so severe, whether it was physical or psychological, but it had to be, we had to privatize, we had to move these people out into the community. We've seen privatization in schools like we talked about. I mean, the Youngstown plan is the ultimate example of putting profit into public schools. They take over the elected school board and say, yeah, you got elected, but we don't care. And the state takes it over and puts a CEO in place, and that CEO makes a high salary, and that CEO can do whatever he or she wants in order to move forward with education in that particular city, but everything's shielded. Jobs Ohio, privatization. I mean, Jobs Ohio used to be the Department of Development where you could actually go, I can go as a legislator, if a business owner has a question, I can bring the business owner to the liaison from the Department of Development and talk about job expansion or job creation. But Jobs Ohio has all of these levels that you can't even penetrate and you don't even know what people are making. So big money out of politics means a lot of different things in Ohio, and those are some of the examples that I've seen.
Okay, there's one in the back here, and then I'll bring it to the front.
Okay?
Welcome to Cincinnati, Joe.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being a candidate. My question is, what part did you play in the bipartisan creation of the issue 1? And what is your stance? What's your most deeply felt position about the issue 1?
Sure, that's a good question. If you think back a couple years back, we did the state redistricting piece. And so I worked with President Faber and a couple of House members to get that shored up, and we got that passed. And so that took some negotiation and that took a lot of work, but that was only for the state issues. And I will say that the Republican legislators moved on that because they were fearful that the people were going to do a citizens initiative and do something to make that change. So that's when they jumped in, and then they wanted to negotiate with Democrats in order to get things done. And so I was able to get that done, and I was very proud of that. And I think starting in 2021, we will eliminate a lot of gerrymandering for the state lines. Now this issue that you're going to see in May, we just worked through in Columbus, passed the Fair Districts Coalition. I'm sure some people in here are with the Fair Districts Coalition. You did this. We just cleaned it up. But again, the pressure that you put on Republican legislators to say, go ahead guys, keep on screwing around with this. We're going to get the signatures and we're going to get it on the ballot in November and you're not going to like it, made the Republicans move in a way that they had to get it on the ballot in May because they were scared of what was coming on the ballot in November. Fair Districts Coalition signed off on the May piece. I'm a supporter of it. I voted for it. We should all vote for it. It will definitely help gerrymandering when it comes to federal redistricting. The petition that was being circulated for November, I think was better. But I'll tell you, with working with what we had on that particular day, it was a win for the people, and the people should vote yes on that issue.
So this is Peter Rose, who's taking the minutes of the meeting here, and so be careful with your precise answers.
I was talking to some of my former colleagues at Miami University yesterday, and they were saying that this electronic online courses is a great way of not only getting rid of jobs, but discouraging smart people from even going into education because they're getting rid of tenure track positions at the college level, and they're really just trying to dream up ways, typical of capitalism, of getting rid of as many jobs as possible. So I'm just applauding you fighting the electronic education, which is really an excuse for less education.
Thank you. I mean, we have to remember that we all are human beings and we need to interact with one another in face-to-face ways. I mean, yeah, everything is more digital and computerized, and I get that, but there's always going to be the need for those soft skills in life that you can't get sitting in front of your computer screen every day.
Hi, my name is Bev Baker, and I have sort of a half-formulated thought. I hope I can articulate it. But say that the Democrats will take the governor and lieutenant governor. What would be your thoughts and strategies for working with a legislature that's probably still majority Republican?
No, that's a fully crafted thought in a real one. I mean, I get this question every night, and this has been my life. You know, this is what I've worked in for the last 9 years. And being the minority leader for the past 3 years, I was able to work across the aisle when I could to get things done. The people in Columbus know that I am workable to a certain extent, but when I'm pushed, you'll see things of me fighting people on the Senate floor and arguing because, you know, sometimes you get your back pushed against the wall. and you gotta fight back, and you gotta speak the truth. But I'll tell you that I have 2 bills right now that are pending with Republican co-sponsors that I think are really important, that I think will pass. The first one is broadband access from corner to corner in the state. You know, if we don't have broadband, then what businesses are gonna come? If we don't have broadband, kids can't even do their homework at home because they don't have good, reliable internet. So the bill would put $50 million into broadband expansion from corner to corner, and I co-sponsored that with Senator Eklund from Geauga County. They just passed a matching bill out of the House that exactly like our Senate bill. They just didn't want me to pass it because I'm running for governor. It's my Democrat. But like, I don't care. I mean, I'm used to this. So that's one piece. Another one is a clean water initiative. So I put forward 2 years ago a clean water initiative to invest in $1 billion infrastructure rebuild across the lake and down the river so that we can make sure that we start dealing with this clean water issue that we have. And I co-sponsored that with Randy Gardner, who's a senator from Toledo. That piece, I think, will move this General Assembly. Kasich didn't like it because he said that he did not want to further leverage our state with bond investors, even though he has $2 billion sitting in a rainy day fund and we do bonds for roads and bridges and for Third Frontier. But because it was my idea, he didn't think it was a good one. But maybe he'll think it was because Gardner's doing it. But so like I can kind of joke about this because I'm not sensitive. I can work through tough stuff. And I've done it. And I will do it. The goal is to get things done for the people in Ohio. It's not to score political points and play political games. And I would be very clear on the first day that I'm governor that that's the approach. It's working with Republicans on both to get this done in both the House and the Senate. Hopefully, if you really want to go in the weeds, if we win for governor and we pick up some statewides and the Senate and the House pick up 3, 4, 5, 6, then we become a veto-proof House and Senate. So at least when I would veto something, they could not straight party line override it. That's what the situation is now. And that you're almost powerless in the minority when that happens. At least when you have that veto override protection, everybody needs each other a little bit. Because they don't want to just pass bills and then you have a veto and then stop it. Like, that's not workable for anybody. And constituents, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you don't like that. But when there's that built-in balance and that protection, it's really important. You know, I think that we can pick those seats up. But like I'm going to say tonight at the debate, we need the right candidates. We need the right candidate for governor, and we need the right candidates for state rep and state senate. If we just think that this blue wave is magically going to help us win these seats, we're kidding ourselves. You need people that can talk to their constituents and get some people back that voted for Donald Trump. If we don't do that, if we don't get people in the African American community engaged and we can't bring some Trump voters back, we don't win. The numbers aren't there. So we need people, candidates all the way up and all the way down that can do it because the blue wave doesn't magically come. Yes.
Okay, wait. You're next.
You're next.
Oh,
My question was, with all the privatization and the right and these jobs turning from right to work, how do you feel? What's your opinion on this progressive dismantling of the labor union?
That's a good question. Here's what has happened with organized labor since I started. So remember Kasich got in, he said, get on the bus or the bus is going to run you over, and he wrote out Senate Bill 5. Well, the bus ran him over because the people backlashed and said, all right, you guys can pass it, but we're going to do the initiative and we're going to kick your ass on it. And that's what happened. So ever since then, he has a group of legislators in the House that holds out this right to work. So there's always 15 or 20 co-sponsors in the House with the right to work bill. It's sitting there right now. But they haven't moved it because they know that the coalition that beat them for Senate Bill 5 will beat them for right to work. So what they've been doing is exactly what you just said. Little by little, nipping at labor. So privatization, all that stuff is one good example. The Youngstown plant breaking teachers' contracts is another example. Another one that was real frustrating for me as a workers' comp lawyer just happened, 3-4 months ago. They shortened the window for filing a workers' comp claim from 2 years to 1 year. And for most people, that doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. And the way that they explained it on the Senate floor was, well, if you get hurt, you go to the hospital and you file a claim. That's not necessarily true. That's only true if you cut your arm off and your wife fills out your form for your husband, fills out the form for you, and then we get it filed. But somebody that picks up, something in a scrapyard that hurts their back and is working through it for 8 or 9 months because the boss is saying, hey man, keep it up, you're fine, everything's cool, I'll pay for your bills on the side, don't file the claim. Then 12 months goes by, 12 months and a day, they kick them out and say, hit the road, man. Then you go to a lawyer to try to file your claim, and they say, no, your claim's dead, statute of limitations. That bill was passed and pushed by the Chamber of Commerce and NFIB. And it was their dream bill that they put in as an amendment to another bill and passed at midnight one night we were there late. That's exactly what you're talking about. And then nobody had time to react to it because nobody saw it coming. But it's not big enough that it requires or gets enough people up in arms about doing a referendum on it, because referendums are too expensive and too timely. And so that's the kind of stuff that is crushing organized labor right now. You just got to keep fighting. And as a governor, you just veto all that stuff.
Okay, I have two brief questions. The first one is, Betty wouldn't really say if they are going to say we need to outlaw semi-automatic weapons in the state of Ohio. Secondly, she sort of implied that, they're the only people that have a chance to win this election. To be honest with you, I mean, I'm a political junkie and I had never really even heard of you. And so my question is, she seemed to say that they have a lot of money in their coffers. How much do you have, and what are you going to do to really win this? That's the most important thing, win.
Well, let's do the gun thing first, all right? So, I think about this 3 different ways when it comes to protecting our kids and protecting people in Ohio. First, we have to give the schools the resources to have the flexibility to do what they believe will keep their kids safe. Whether it's hiring additional resource officers, behavioral specialists in the hallway, putting in new communication system. I proposed a bill to allocate $40 million to all the school districts so that every school gets seed money for their project, not just the biggest schools with the best grant writers get it done. So that's first thing, piece to the puzzle, right? I proposed a red flags bill last week that I'm testifying in the Senate tomorrow that says if there's a dangerous situation, family or law enforcement feels that the guns need to be temporarily taken away for 14 days, they can petition the court can say yes, they can go and they can take the guns for 14 days until you have hearings with the merits of the case. Testifying tomorrow in the Senate, Moms Demand Action has given me their distinction award as I've been to 5 or 10 meetings up in Akron and Cleveland, talking to them, getting them engaged. They're gonna stand with me tomorrow and testify. We move towards closing gun show loopholes, closing private sale loopholes. You shouldn't be able to buy guns without going through a background check, and it happens every day at gun shows and online. So we got to do that. The next thing we need to do is make sure that we're investing in mental health so that we can flag people that have problems and give them the help necessary in order to get them across the finish line and get them back on track. And the last thing we need to do is figure out whether or not we want civilians to be able to have semi-automatic weapons. I've been very clear, for semi-automatic assault rifles. I've been very clear that if I was governor, I would sign that bill. And I've said that online, I've said that at candidates forum, so that's the gun platform, okay? How do I win? I've raised, if the first question is how much money have you raised, I think I've raised $850,000 in 2017. Rich Cordray raised $2 million in 2 months. So when that happened, then we had the primary that existed before with Connie, with Betty, and with Nan, and myself, dissolved into everybody went with Cordray except for me, and then Dennis and O'Neill jumped in, and so now that's the 4. I believe that we've laid the groundwork to get this done with a grassroots finish. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars left, okay? We don't have millions, and we are going to, for the next month, really make a push online with social media ads and get people on the ground working every day. We have people in different communities door knocking daily, phone baking daily, letter writing campaign daily, text campaign daily. We are putting in the work, and we are pushing. And I'm sorry that you haven't heard of me. I've been down here a bunch, I've tried, but it's a hell of a long way from Youngstown. And so I've really tried to push in the Cincinnatis and the Daytons and the Toledos and the places that aren't necessarily down the street, but it is a big state. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people paying attention tonight. We've turned a lot of heads with the campaign in the last 3 or 4 months. I don't know what any kind of polling looks like. There was one poll out that had Rich at 20, Dennis at 20, me at 6, and O'Neill at 4, and that came out a couple of months ago. But that showed that 50% of the people that said they were going to vote in the Democratic primary didn't have a dog in the fight. And so I think there's a wide lane for somebody to emerge, and we just got to keep our eye on the prize and keep working. And so that's the path that we're trying to work through.
We've just come to the end of our time, but because Betty ran a couple minutes late, Jennifer was the first one with her hand up. You still have a question?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jennifer Baker. So I'm glad you said red flag. My big issue right now is the gun violence in schools. So the Parkland shooter moved through the public school system. He was a very troubled, mentally ill youth. Went from school to school, suspended, expelled, and ended up in an alternative program. But when he became an adult, there were no red flags. Is there anything that can prevent a mentally ill youth who leaves school, becomes an adult, from purchasing a weapon at that time?
I think that it's all part of that comprehensive plan where you're flagging the problems in school, you're flagging the problems in your adult life, you're investing the resources necessary in order to catch the problem before it manifests and get that person into treatment so that that does not occur. Now, there's no perfect way to do this, but if you don't invest resources and invest time and put layers of protection all the way from the schools to the adult life, you're going to have more and more of this occur. I've really spent a lot of time working with college kids and high school kids to talk to them about the way that they feel about this. Last night I was at a high school student's house in Bexley. She had all her friends from our senior class over and their parents over so that we can talk through it. This is an issue that they are very engaged with, and they normally are very disengaged with politicians, but on this particular issue, this is it. And once you get them engaged on that one issue, then they talk about everything else, and you can really pull a lot of good perspective from young people, and so I'm trying to really develop that. But at the end of the day, it's about getting people into treatment and helping them before that occurs. Addiction is also a piece here, right? So we have to have the resources to deal with the opioid problem and a lot of the addiction, because mental health and addiction oftentimes goes hand in hand, and then you see those domestic violences, you see those suicides, you see a lot of that violence that comes around after you don't deal with addiction and mental health.
Ethel Guttenberg would like you to hear one thing from her.
Of course.
Yeah, I just want to correct one slight misconception, first of all. The Parkland shooter was not old enough to buy a 6-shooter, but because of the law in the state, he could buy an assault-type weapon. But this has to be a national thing, It's not a matter of he can't buy it in one place, but he can go across right here to Indiana and purchase something else. The gun shows, the whole thing. There have to be, across the board, national laws, but we have to start with, unfortunately, we can't do more than start with each state. And I do want to say about the young people, I've been meeting with them constantly now for all these weeks, and they're amazing. It's very personal to them. They really understand what is going on in their lives, and they're really important, and let's give them all the support that they need, because they're terrific, they're smart, and they're doing stuff that nobody has been able to do before.
Well, and it's...
Yes, you're here.
And most of us, I never felt scared or that I was in danger when I was going to school. Most of them never felt like this, but now they got to go through all this training, they got to go through all these drills, you have all these false alarms, God forbid you have a real issue, and it's crazy to think that that's in your mind when you're trying to go to school and learn to have fun, to enjoy your life. And that is, but it's real, and we have to try to change that for them, and that's the thing that they constantly remind me of, is what that feeling is like.
And it's movies, and it's, shows in Las Vegas, it's all over, shopping centers. I was just saying, it's not only in school, it's where they go to the shopping center, they go to movies, they go to, enjoy themselves in Las Vegas at a music show. It's everywhere. So we really need to deal with it.
I just want to mention that Ethel Gutenberg, who just been speaking, has lost her granddaughter in the Florida shooting. So she has something to say, and we need to be supportive of her. Thank you. And
I just want to ask, do you have a lieutenant governor candidate?
I should have said that about an hour ago, or a half hour ago. Yeah, Stephanie Dodd is my lieutenant governor candidate. She's on the State Board of Education. She lives in Newark and has represented that central Ohio region for the past 2 terms. And so she's been elected twice in that district. And so she's very passionate about the Durolf case. She's very passionate about education as a whole, charter school accountability, and also the bill that was brought up to Betty earlier about taking away the state school board's right to have a say-so in education.
And with that, I want to thank Joe Giovanni. Thank you so much for coming to us. Lots for debate tonight. There's going to be are all 4 of you going to be there tonight?
All 4 of us will be there.
4 Democratic candidates tonight.
7 o'clock.
Channel 12? Channel 5.
But it starts at 7 o'clock. And it'll be streamed live as well online.
Street, 7 o'clock, they're at the Miami campus, and there's going to be 4 of them to choose from on May 8th. And folks, May 8th is coming up. I don't want you to leave yet, folks, because now comes the important part of our meeting, which is introductions and announcements. This is what we usually do at the beginning of the meeting, and I don't want you to leave yet because we have some nice people who have been waiting this whole time to introduce themselves. I would like to mention that we have Connie Pillage here. Thank you. One person in our party. Let's see, who else is here? Oh, right.
Judge Marilyn Zayas.
We're going to get a microphone to you.
Alrighty.
Running for judge, we have.
Running for re-election.
Running for re-election as judge.
Yes, so I was elected in 16 midterm.
You got it.
Running now in 18.
Real close.
I'm going to share just a couple minutes, all right? When I ran in 16, somebody asked. When I ran in 16, somebody asked me, what's the difference between a Democratic and a Republican judge? And I'm going to start right there. I'm telling you, the main difference in Hamilton County is that the courts, that the Republican Party have had a stronghold over the courts for decades. So when people like me come forward and say, I want to run, we come politically unencumbered saying we want to run. And we want to run because we really want to make a difference and we want to serve in the way that those seats are intended to be served. So I always carry this with me. This is me at the age of 7, okay? And I carry this with me because I take this girl to court with me every single day. This little Latina girl growing up in New York City who really grew up in neighborhoods that most people don't make it out of high school. So this little girl knew what it was like not to have a voice, to be treated lesser than, to not even be expected to do much with her life. And so I take this girl with me every day because my job is to ensure that every case that comes before me gets thoroughly reviewed and that the entire record is looked at, all the law is looked at. And my motto is that I'm faithful to the law. The law was created, there's underpinnings to it, there's a purpose to it, right? And so, people like me, we're not asking to be treated differently or special. We're asking to be treated just the same as everyone else. So when a case comes before me, that's what people are looking for. They're looking to be heard, for their case to be evaluated under the law and to ensure that if there's any issues, that they get addressed by the Court of Appeals. So I serve on the Court of Appeals. I'm now running for the full term. The Court of Appeals is everything that gets appealed in Hamilton County. No matter what court it comes out of, if it's a state court, it's going to be appealed to my court. We serve, it's 3 judges to a panel, so collaboration is very important. The background of that judge is very important because why do we get 3 judges for every case? Well, 2 heads are better than 1, right? 3 are even better. And so the idea is to have all different backgrounds and perspectives that are going to be reviewing that case. So you're going to meet a lot of candidates and a lot of important people in the coming months between now and November. I'm going to make it super easy for you to remember me. It's super easy. I just need you to remember one letter, the letter Z. Right? I'm the only Z on the ballot. So I have my cards here with me. I'm going to distribute them. What I'm going to ask is, most of you don't need this because you already heard about the Z, okay? Share them with someone else. Take extra ones and share them with your network. Take the power of your vote and turn it into multiples. And that's how we keep the seat. Before me, the last Democrat that was elected to our Court of Appeals was in the year 2000. And that was an incumbent rerunning unopposed. So when we're talking about a stronghold, yes. So it's very important that we keep this seat because much has been gained with this seat and much more can be gained. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Peter, we need to make sure you know Peter. Peter is our newsletter person. If you have, please see him. See these little cards? If you have an announcement that you want in our newsletter, please get that to him. We need to get the microphone to Jessica. Jessica, right? Jessica, hold on a minute. I'm so proud of this movement because our organization here, the Greater Cincinnati Democrats, has been part of this movement. Jessica, tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Jessica Munger. I'm the program director for Move to Amend. We are a national. Hey, I'm here from California. Don't hold it against me, please. Move to Amend is a national grassroots organization. We're working to pass the 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which says two things. The first is that constitutional rights are for human beings, not corporations. It seems pretty obvious, but it's not. The second thing is that money is not speech. Again, sounds pretty obvious, right? Yeah, so let's codify that in the Constitution. Tonight we're having an event. We're going to go through the history of corporate power, what we can do about it, and the growing movement to amend the Constitution to end these problems. It's tonight at 7 o'clock at
Lakeview UCC in Mainville on Columbia Road.
Thank you. I'm really excited. I hope you're there. It's going to be fun. And I've been in Ohio about a week now. It's the first time I've been here. It's lovely. I love Ohio. I might stay. So thank you so much for having me at your lunch. And I hope I'll see you tonight at 7 o'clock.
Thank you. Okay. Are there people that we need to introduce? Everhart. Janet Everhart. Okay, Ethan first.
My name is Ethan Kissick. I am with the Ohio Democratic Party's Campaign for Ohio. This is good. And we are building what is going to be the teams, the neighborhood teams at the very grassroots level that will go out and make Ohio blue. In 2018, we are going to be working to elect Democrats up and down the ticket from school board all the way to governor and senator this November. I'm going to be in touch with some of you in person about setting up some teams, setting up some meetings. Once the primaries are over, we're going to ramp up, hit the ground running, and get every single nominated Democrat elected that we can.
Go, Ethan!
And now,
Ethan should come back here.
Hi everybody, it's Dr. Janet Everhart running for Congress in the 2nd District. Early voting started today, and I went over to the Board of Elections in Claremont County. I was one of 3 people, and 2 of us were Democrats, so 2 out of 3 people in Claremont County are voting Democrat so far. I went over to Hamilton County, didn't see a soul, not one person voting while I was there. So you're only like a mile and a half away from the Board of Elections on Smith Road, right behind the Roses in Hamilton County or Norwood. Please go over and vote today. All right.
It's not too late. You can start voting now. Richard Asmus.
Hi everyone, I am Richard Asmus, and the young woman here standing up is Meg Bruck, and she and I are the campaign organizers for Yes on Issue 1 for Hamilton County. Our goal, at least a 75% positive victory vote, so that it shows Ohio is totally in favor of ending gerrymandering and having fair districts. We need your help. Each of you can be active citizens for yes on issue 1 by passing out leaflets. We have those there. Meg is showing. The second thing is postcard parties or postcards from your home. We write them personal, a little note, and we provide the addresses and all that for you. So leafleting, postcarding, and third, if you have any place that you go that we could come and have some of our speakers bureau come to explain. There's still a lot of misunderstandings about issue 1. Please let us know. We're glad to come. I'll be here at the end. Meg will be here at the end.
Yeah, I can pass out leaflets to you today. If you can commit to, say, an hour and a half of leafleting, say at Finley Market or Earth Day, just stop before you leave today. I'll give you leaflets and some of the places that we recommend. If you can give an hour and a half, you can talk to 75, 100 people. It makes a big difference, and they really appreciate it. Most people have no idea that this is on the ballot, and they're for it if you talk to them one-on-one. So we're going to make that easy for you to do by giving you leaflets today if you have that time.
And sign up. We have a sign-up sheet for you. Become
Issue 1 is non-partisan. Democrats and Republicans are all for it. The League of Women Voters has endorsed it, so man, it's really out there, but we need to get the voting done. It's really important.
And now to hear from somebody who's usually very shy because of their youth, and
Martha.
she'll do her best.
Go, Martha.
I'll do my best. Look, you probably signed a petition over the past year or so about what is now called Issue 1. Those petitions were thrown out. 600,000 of them. Well, what happened, the issue that we signed petitions for is somewhat different from what is now being put before us. It was a far better issue. It had nothing to do with the Democratic and Republican parties, as I understand it. The Voter Rights Organization worked on this for over a year. Camille Wimbish is a wonderful young black woman that led this fight to get all the petitions in and all like that. We were on the ballot for November. When the parties, I believe I'm right about this, when the parties, Republican Party mainly, decided that might pass and make it hard for them to gerrymander. Therefore, they created their own issue that would be voted on now. And it won't do much of anything as some people see it, and I've read every detail of it. It's terribly complicated. What it would guarantee is the party in power will still control.
No, that's not true. But it is true that there are changes made and we need to get it passed.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to people afterwards if they have questions about what this issue is and why the parties came to an agreement on it and what's the current status of the petitions. I'm happy to do that, but we don't really have the time to do it with the whole group.
Still, it's being recommended by both parties, the League of Women Voters. We need to get this passed.
ACLU said no, they weren't recommending.
They said they didn't take a stand.
That's right. ACLU.
Hi folks, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Steve Long. I'm here with my colleague Janet. We are working, Joe made the comment about the blue wave, and it's not going to happen on its own. One of the things that a group we are affiliated with called SWORD, we're trying to get people engaged, energized, educated, so that we can elect progressive candidates here in Ohio. What we're doing is running some happy hours. We're also then doing some hands-on training. And there are half-page sheets on the counter if you want to take a look. But we are working in particular on two areas. One, so frequently people have trouble canvassing. They just don't feel like they know what to do and how to do it. We're actually doing training on canvassing. We're also doing training on social media, something that I think a lot of folks are interested in. If you'd like to know more, take a look at our half sheet. Come see one of us afterwards. We'd be glad to talk to you.
Good people. Bonnie still has her pussy hats, $10 in the back. And we've actually had a whole bunch sold today. March for Science this weekend.
Yeah, that's right, the 14th, right?
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
I have the petition. If any of you haven't signed it and want to sign it, it's a ballot initiative for reducing incarceration in Ohio by using the money for drug rehab instead of incarceration for low-level
Sounds like a plan.
low-level drug possession. So it'll be on the ballot in the fall if we get enough signatures.
Sign that petition for Sue. See Sue.
Anybody interested?
Make sure you see Sue. Other announcements, people. I have to tell you, we had to have a little bit different program today if you're new to us, but please, if you think like you would like to come back, I have, please take our planned list of speakers with you, or get one from the table. We usually have a whole lot of stuff from a whole lot of people for all the announcements for all of the people that are working or running for anything. And we usually have our bar. It was really nice today having so many people, but our bar kind of got co-opted for food instead of all of our information. Please know that we usually have a bar full of information, and we welcome you to anything that we have out there. And if you know somebody that wants something to put out, announcements made, please come to us, and we will give you time or a moment to run things.
I would just like to reiterate, this administration has been so anti-science that the March for Science really is important. Saturday, the 14th, 11 o'clock. I think it starts at Sawyer Point, right? So show up and make your voices heard.
I'm a science teacher.
Yeah.
Chemistry. I love it.
And if you didn't hear from Alberta, we don't like to waste food. We have a lot of food. I don't know how much is left, but please take it home with you. You paid for it. Don't waste it.
Help yourself to our food. Please, you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you. Thank you for